Delaware is home to more than 5,000 nonprofit organizations, and each play an important role in serving our communities, whether that's providing food and shelter, improving our education system, providing healthcare, or advancing the arts. But in the last several months, that landscape has shifted, and a series of executive orders from President Trump, along with significant federal funding cuts, have left many of these organizations on unstable ground. We're here to talk about that today with House Majority Leader Kerri Evelyn Harris and Sheila Bravo, President of the Delaware Alliance for Nonprofit Advancement. Together, we'll talk about how our nonprofits are navigating these challenges, how they interact with state government, and what House Democrats are doing to support them during this difficult time. We're going to start off, we're going to have a conversation today about nonprofits in our state and what you guys have been going through for the last several months. But before we get into that, I'll just have you both introduce yourselves. So, Rep. Harris, if you want to start off and talk about your connection to the nonprofit space.
Absolutely. So I'm Representative Kerri Evelyn Harris. I'm the Majority Leader here in the House. And I've been dealing with nonprofits from the time I was a young child and my parents were involved in nonprofits. But in my adult life, I have been on the board of several, from Delaware Center for Justice, the Abortion Fund, the People's Community Center, and several others. I've also worked for nonprofits that deal with everything from advancing economic justice to criminal justice to environmental justice. And so I know firsthand what it means to work in the margins, but financially, while doing your best to stretch every dollar to help the community that you want to serve. So I'm very dedicated to my nonprofits, making sure that they thrive. And the reality is no government, especially here in Delaware, would be able to survive without the work of nonprofits.
And Sheila, I'll let you introduce yourself.
What she said. That's great. I'm Sheila Bravo, and President and CEO of DANA, the Delaware Alliance for Nonprofit Advancement. And we're an organization whose mission is really to help advance and support Delaware nonprofits in the state. So really appreciate your perspective, because you're absolutely right. Nonprofits are in many ways partners with government, and do a lot of the work that business doesn't do and government doesn't do. We fill the gaps. I always like to say that nonprofits are communities innovators. They see a problem or an opportunity, and people come together and say, we can fix this, and a nonprofit is born.
So you work with a wide range of nonprofits up and down the state. Can you talk about what the last few months have been like for those nonprofits and for you yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, we always know that when there's new administrative changes, whether it's the state level or at the federal level, that there's going to be policy changes. I think that for many organizational leaders, the speed of change and the dramatic change is really surprising. For example, for the last several years, there's been an emphasis of really focusing on supporting diversity, equity, inclusion.
Absolutely.
And now it's almost a taboo. And so for organizations whose mission is really to lift up certain populations, their very existence is now in question. I think the other thing that we're seeing is, and again, we always say there's opportunities to fix government, right? But the dramatic funding reductions and the promised dramatic funding reductions is really also very concerning, because again, government often contracts or grants nonprofits to do the work that they don't do. And so when they pull back so dramatically, where will those services, how will those services get paid? And particularly, you talked about environmental justice as an example. I mean, that's an area that this administration, from a policy standpoint, is not interested in supporting. And so that for those organizations that do that work, they have a lot of questions right now about how they can continue to do that work.
And Rep. Harris, I'll ask you to put your legislator hat back on and kind of respond to what Sheila was saying, but also talk about, from your perspective, what have the last few months been like in terms of your work with nonprofits?
Before I put my legislator hat back on, what I understand is a lot of people have been shaken, not just the nonprofit world, because of these massive cuts at the federal level. But again, the impact on the nonprofit world has been felt. Myself, 2 months ago, I was laid off because of the cuts at the federal level. I worked for an international nonprofit that works in 6 countries on economic, health, any number of justice issues. My charge was here in the Mid-Atlantic around economic and environmental justice. And when the cuts came, and so heavily between USAID, funding coming from the EPA for environmental justice, and a lot of the equity work, they had to make tough decisions in our organization, which is a relatively well-funded organization, but thinking long-term, how do they stay impactful? And it was decided that our work here in the Mid-Atlantic, because it was relatively new, about 5 years old, had to be the first cut so they could sustain some of the more of the legacy programs. And this is in a time when everybody's looking for work. Thousands upon thousands of people at the federal level, hundreds of thousands of people in the nonprofit world are on edge or have already lost jobs. This is a real problem. And, I'm hoping there'll be a soft landing for some folks in our state government because we have openings. So that's a little plug. If you're looking for a job to sustain you through things, we do have a number of openings in our state government that could use your expertise. But putting back on my state legislator hat, we need to figure out how to sustain our nonprofits. We are in a budget crisis in our state and in our nation. And if we couldn't survive in the best of times without nonprofits, how will we survive in the worst of times? And we really need to think together, how do we move forward, join side by side with nonprofits and say, hey, what are the non-negotiables? This is what has to be there in order to make sure you function, and figure out where we fit that into our budget to make sure that we're strong partners.
And just building on that question, I know I get this question, so I'm sure you get this question a lot. What can our state do, and what can our state do to support these nonprofits and people who may have lost their jobs due to grant cuts or other federal cuts?
Absolutely. So the big thing is how much we can fit into our budget. We have to remember, though, our budget is largely taken up by healthcare costs and education costs. So it's about 60% of our budget when you just look at those. And then the other 40% goes towards paying for state employees and paying for roads and paying for the assistance to nonprofits. So there's a little bit of money to use as what I call discretionary. Think of your family budget, some income, a whole bunch of bills, and a little bit to figure out the rest with. And that's what we're working with. The government can provide grants. We're going to stretch as many grants as we can while also having to take care of the rest of our space. There is a conversation about the possibility of having someone embedded with the governor's office who directly deals with nonprofits to help find things like grants and from private organizations, and to also try to push the community to help out a little more. This is going to be an all hands on deck piece. I understand folks will say, well, that's why the government's there. But the reality of the United States has been that in the worst of times, we've all tightened our belts, jumped in the same boat together, put aside all of our differences, and pulled each other through the roughest times. So we are going to need that. And then also as a state, as representatives, we are really trying to prepare people. Prep yourself mentally and materially. Things will get tough. The more you're prepared mentally and materially, you're not going to feel like the rug has been ripped out from underneath you. And the better we'll be able to maneuver together. And we will make tough decisions, but we'll make them together. Everything's important. Not everything can be prioritized. But we do, in the Democratic House caucus, understand that nonprofits are a key partner in making sure our state runs.
Absolutely. And to that effect, what have you been telling your members? I know you got them of all sizes. They're probably disproportionately impacted, across the board. But what have you been telling your members when they come to you for guidance?
Well, when you talk about being prepared, I think that's really the big thing. I mean, the administration is making promises of cuts, so there's some time for some organizations. In other cases, they've gotten the notice and their funding has been cut immediately. So we've really focused on first helping nonprofits be aware of the different policy changes that are coming down the pike, how that impacts them. And then we're providing resources on contingency planning, which is the first step, which is if the crisis happens and your funding is cut, what do you need to do? But then also really thinking beyond that. And to your point, the world is going to change. So just like in COVID, there was no going back. This is an opportunity to really revisit mission, to understand are there some programs that perhaps are not a high priority that an organization can scale back? And maybe we'll also find through these important conversations that there's new ways in which we can provide services in maybe in a more efficient way. So we're really encouraging nonprofit leaders and their boards of directors to really step back, take this time to really reflect on what this could look like for them, and then communicate. Because particularly if an organization doesn't think they're going to make it, because unfortunately nonprofits often don't have months and months of cash on hand. Yeah. So better that they know that, and then we can help identify ways in which their services potentially could transition to maybe another organization that has a stronger financial position. We absolutely are so fortunate in our state to have such a wide diversity of nonprofits, arts, culture, senior services, environmental agencies, and we want them. We don't want them all to go away. But we do recognize that for some, this will be a difficult time, and we are in this place to help them, and help to offer guidance and resources as possible.
I know one of the big nonprofits in our state that is easily recognizable to anybody is the Food Bank of Delaware. And when they were going through a rough time just a few weeks ago, losing truckloads of foods that would have gone to hundreds of thousands of meals, people stepped up in a really big way. I know our members, including Rep. Harris, organized a drive that was extremely successful. So there are a lot of people out there who want to help. So what is, either of you, what is your message for those people? How can they help or get involved?
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we also have a lot of people moving into the state that may not even be aware of the amazing services and programs that are out there. So certainly you can go to our website, delawarenonprofit.org, and we have our members listed that showcase the different types of nonprofits out there. Really encourage volunteerism. Volunteers, we say that there's 80,000 people employed by nonprofits, but there's another 250, 300,000 people that work in nonprofits through volunteerism. And so helping in those ways also can be a great way to help lift up these organizations.
I would say what she said, and just also add, when it comes to the state legislature side, we really want to have conversations. And so the more you're involved with sharing what the priorities are for you, what is important, but also understanding other people's stake in the game, that's helpful. The worst we can do is fight each other. And so on the House side, we're really welcoming the conversation around, this is important to me. However, I understand this has to go first. The more we have that input from community, the easier it will be for us to finalize a budget going into June.
And lastly, the cop-out question I always ask, is there anything else either of you wanted to add that we didn't get to?
I just want to say we've been through dark times before as a state and nation, and we always came through it, and we'll do it again. So while you might hear a lot of negativity out there, don't ignore it, but don't wallow in it. Keep pushing forward, find joy in the moments that you can, find a way to help out, and eventually we'll get through this and be a stronger nation in the state because of it.
And I would add that, a couple of years ago during COVID, it was nonprofits that stepped up, that were out there helping people even before government. And we were able to do that because we worked together. And so I think that it's really important for us to keep the lines of communication open, particularly between government and nonprofits, because that idea of everything's important, but not everything can be a priority is helpful, especially as nonprofits think about, well, if my organization isn't going to be a priority or my mission, now that I know that, maybe I can shift my resources to really engaging with the public to see if I can raise more donation dollars. So I think open communication and us having those conversations about priorities will really help us all. It's going to be a different world after the dust settles, but I do believe that when there is crisis, there's also opportunity. And so I always like to try to end on a ray of hope. But it is definitely going to be difficult times. And at Dana, we're here to support nonprofit leaders and their boards to help them navigate.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. From the Delaware House Democratic Caucus, this is Whip Count. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things happening in Legislative Hall. Until next time.